Hello everyone, Atkpwr here with some really spicy information I've recently received about penetration values and AP and all the good stuff from Steel Division 2. By the end of this video, you are actually going to understand the real mechanics behind penetration values and criticals and all that kind of stuff in Steel Division 2. So make sure to stick around if you actually want to get good at killing tanks and vehicles and things in Steel Division 2. Now, a lot of these things I did not know after playing this game for thousands of hours. And a really helpful user on Discord called Lafachan sent me all this information, and this is all public stuff. I know, hate on me for not knowing all this stuff was out there, but you know, Eugen is famously secretive on the mechanics of their game. So this data really reveals a lot of important and interesting things about how gun mechanics and stuff work in this game and penetration, all that. And by understanding this, you're gonna have a whole lot of improvement in your chance of actually killing tanks, winning tank battles, killing vehicles, and using units as effectively as possible. So let's dive right into this. We have a couple things to look at here. First off is our AP distance drop-off. So we talk about this all the time, but in the game, the penetration value you see on the unit card is at point-blank range. In other words, at 100 meters or less. That's considered point-blank. So at 100 meters or less, that value is the value. That is the stated value of penetration on the tank, okay? Or weapon, whatever it happens to be, right? And as the bullet flies farther, the penetration value drops, right? So at the weapon's maximum range, the actual penetration value will be lower than at the point-blank range that we have at the beginning. And now APCR is supposed to drop off faster than AP. Okay, and heat doesn't drop off at all, right? So heat is just straight. There is no drop off. So it's not even here in this chart here because it's just is what it is, right? Heat is exactly the same at 100 as it is at 1500. So that one we're not even in the discussion about, but that is why heat is so strong and why they have the accuracy so low on it, because it's really strong but in that way. But AP and APCR have drop off over distance. Okay, now that being said, so here's the drop, and we'll go into this in more detail here in a minute. But even more importantly, over here is the secret to penetration values in this game. So when the armor and the penetration of a gun match, okay, so there's a tank with 100 millimeters of armor, and there's a tank with 100 millimeters of penetration. Let's say whatever distance we happen to be at, it ends up being 100, okay? Like, as we said, it drops and stuff. Let's say we're at point blank, and our penetration value is 100, okay? So both of these two units have the same exact armor and penetration. The actual chance of penning that tank is actually 54%. It's not 100%. I think a lot of people, myself included for a long time, now I know it doesn't, at this point I knew that this was true, but I didn't know exactly what the percentage value was. But a lot of people function under the assumption that if my tank is equal to the armor, it will penetrate. And that is not the case. It's actually, when they are equal, you have a 54%, half, essentially one in every other shot should penetrate that tank. And of course, RNG, the way it works, it doesn't actually work out to every other bullet, right? But the point is, at 0, you are getting a 54% chance of penning that tank. It's not anywhere close to 100, which is crazy, right? So in fact, you need your gun to be significantly higher to actually create a consistent penetration. That number being 45 millimeters more penetration than armor for it to consistently pen. So knowing that means if you really want a tank without a doubt to kill something, you need to be 45 millimeters of armor of penetration higher than the armor value of the target tank. Now, and here's the other important part to note. If your gun has less penetration than the armor, it still has a % chance to pen. And I think we all know this. I've had plenty of people comment, and I know myself, of units penning things that they appear to have no business penetrating whatsoever. That's because all the way up to 50 millimeters of difference, a weapon can still pen armor. So like, even if you are 45 millimeters less than the armor, right? So the penetration on your gun is 45 millimeters less than the armor value. You still have a 1% chance. Now, this is, of course, a tiny number, but let's look at 20 millimeters. You have a 1 in 5 chance of penning that tank. Okay, so even at 20 millimeters under, you have a 90 millimeter penetration up against 110 millimeters of armor. You still have a 1 in 5 chance of penning that tank. That's not actually terrible. Now, of course, most of us don't want to take that chance, but the fact is, you still have a pretty high chance of penning units when you are beneath the armor value a pretty good bit. So that means there's a lot more wiggle room in here. And truthfully, to get all the way up to 90% penetration, you have to be 25 millimeters above the armor. So let's think of a basic interaction here. A Stug 3 versus a Sherman, right? A Sherman 5. Sherman 5 has 100 millimeters of armor. The Stug 3 has 135 millimeters of penetration. But let's say we're at 1500 meter range. So let's say we're at the Sherman maximum range. Let's go over here to our values. So the Panzer IV, Stug 3 all have this same one. We got to go over here to the 1500 meter range block right there. Your actual penetration value is only 105 millimeters of penetration, which means you are only 5 millimeters above the 100 millimeters of armor on the Sherman, meaning you actually only have a 64% chance of penning the Sherman. It's not nearly as good as it looks on the paper when you first do the math. It's crazy. And if you're firing at the tank at maximum range, your armor penetration value is actually 5 millimeters below the Sherman's armor, which means you have less than 50% chance of penning that Sherman with the Stug. And on the flip side, the Sherman, okay, so the Sherman, let's get down here to good old Sherman, something 1500, should be somewhere right in here, somewhere in this ballpark. No. SU, right here. It should be this one, basically, the 100 millimeters of penetration, right? Oh, no, it's the 90. Just kidding. Right? Shermans have 90. At 1500, you only have 60 millimeters. You are 30 millimeters under. You only have a 10% chance of penning the Stug at maximum range. That is not good odds. Like, that is just not good odds. But that also proves to you why I get so peeved when a Sherman kills my Stug at 500 meter range. They have 85 to my 90, right? They should only have a 45% chance. And at that range, you are at basically, you're not at 100, but you're at, what, 97% chance to pen with the Stug 3? Kind of bullcrap. But anyway, that's counting in hit ratios and accuracy and all that kind of stuff too. But the point is here, it's really important to understand that you still have a significant chance of penning a tank even when you are below the value, right? Even up to 10 millimeters, you're still 36% chance of penetration. That's huge. So that's the first thing to really understand, is that there is a range of penetration values when you are equal. So you got a Panzer III versus a Sherman. Okay, it's not an uncommon matchup. And it doesn't feel bad because the Panzer III has 100 millimeters of base penetration on their AP shell. The problem is you're up against, even if you're point blank, you're up at only a 54% chance of penning. But let's say more likely you're more at like 500 meters, right? It's more likely you're at 500 meters, so we're probably looking at this 50 mil right here. Okay, we are looking at, now we're down to 95. So now we're only at 45% chance. And if you're at 700 meters, now you're only at 90%. You're only at 36% chance. So this is really important to understand when matching up and deciding if you're going to engage, especially armor on armor, but even AP guns shooting at tanks. You have to make a snap mathematical decision. How far am I probably under on this tank? And do I actually have a beneficial chance of killing this armored unit? And that's the calculation you have to make. Now, let's hop back over into this chart over here, because now that we got this established, now that we understand that we are pushing for more penetration if possible, like above it usually, if we really want some real good chances of penetration. Because truthfully, anything under 20 millimeters above, you're now already getting into sub 80% penetration rates, which it already, to me, doesn't sound that confident. Like, I don't feel great if I was like, some guy was like, give me $100 and here's a 70% chance I'll get you your money back with some. It's like, yeah, technically that's better than any other investment opportunity, sure. But if we're being honest, like, that still doesn't feel good. And especially if you're going at zero, right? If you're equal here, if you're over here at equal, do you feel good about deciding on a coin flip if you're going to kill that tank? Probably not. Like, the RNG usually bones you, right? That's just how it works. It always feels that way. So, you know, we're looking for numbers up here. So let's go over here and see, how do we determine what is the drop off? Like, what? So for me, always in my head, it was AP drops slower, right? So the penetration value lowers more slowly the further out. APCR has a faster drop off. Therefore, at maximum ranges, technically AP should be way better than APCR at that point, right? That was always my thought process on it. But that's not even true. That is not actually true. So let's look at, we need something. Okay, so Pack 40. Okay, so the Pack 40 is right here. Okay, that's the Pack 40. That's one. And then we're going to select, actually, let's zoom in a little bit here so to make sure you guys can see. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're zoomed in. You can see all our nice little numbers. Yeah, we got a little bit cut off here, but that's what it is. Actually, we can move over here. Oh, I can't move this one. It's locked. All right. Anyway, so we have this, and then we have the APCR right there. No. Where is it? Poop, 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 poop. This is... Oh, it's down here. Okay. So we have this one, and where'd it go? This one. Okay, perfect. Now we got them highlighted. So the Pack 40, 145 millimeters on the AP, 190 millimeters on the APCR. APCR only has 1,500 meter range, while the normal AP shell has 1,750 meters. Okay, so it's just something to be important to remember. But I was always like, okay, if I'm firing at 1,500 meter range, it's probably better to use my AP shell because it has higher penetration. That was always my personal thought process on this. But when you actually go down the chart here and go to 1,500 meters, it's 110 on the AP and 120 on the APCR. So the APCR is still, per penetration value, a better chance than the AP. Now, that gets into the whole, well, the APCR has lower damage, right? And the AP has higher damage and so on. But I'm not even getting into that. That's kind of your personal preference. Do you want to risk... do you want the chance of getting a much higher crit chance, right? Because criticals do other things. And we'll talk about criticals too, because we have that chart here as well. Do you want to roll for a crit, or do you want the consistency of if I pen 2 times, it will kill the tank? Okay, do you want this consistency, or do you want this chance of one shot killing it, right? Or like knocking it out in some way, or just that this will have a higher chance of penning, right? So if we're going after a Sherman at 1,500 meter range with a Pack 40, right? 110 to 100 means we have a 72% penetration value. That's pretty good, but it's still going to bounce. And then 120, which is 20 over, gets us all the way up to 85%, which means base, you're going to probably pen every time. So you're kind of have to balance then, do I want this more definite hit penetration chance, or do I want this damage, right? And also APCR has higher accuracy too, so there is that other fact. But yeah, I was kind of shocked because I always assumed that, like, oh, here's two others. We have the Panther with their APCR. So the Panther G, everyone talks about the Panther G. Why Atkpwr? Why don't you take more Panther Gs? They're the greatest thing ever. My argument is always, well, the APCR doesn't actually do anything at the end of the day, because once you get out to that range, you're not actually penning more. But the fact is, I was wrong. I mean, the truth is the Panther G is penning more at that range, right? You have 170 millimeters of penetration versus 145. Like, it's not actually that close even. You have a whole, 25 millimeters of penetration difference. Now, the issue is you still are going to struggle to pen an IS-2 and stuff. Like, that doesn't really change. But even if you get to 1,500 meters, now you're at 190 millimeters of penetration. And here's the thing, too, with APCR, it does have a bigger drop-off. Like, let's look here just at the Panther, right? We have 185 and 250 for their base values in terms of their starting point-blank ranges. And when we go all the way to the end of their penetration values, we have 170 and 135. In other words, the AP dropped 50 millimeters of penetration. 185 to 135, 50 millimeters. The APCR dropped 80, right? So we dropped 30 more millimeters of penetration on the APCR. So the drop-off is higher, but there's less range, so technically the drop-off wasn't actually that much faster. And most of the drop-off occurred in the last 50 millimeters, 50 meters of range. If we look here, 210 to 170. Actually, really, we can go up one more. Yeah, no, it's 1,200 to 1,750 here. We lost 50 millimeters of penetration. That's more than half of the lost value in only the last third of the range. So I'm going to say that again because it came out quickly. But so we have 1,500 meters, right? Every 500 meters is a third, right? 50 millimeters of penetration loss, which is more than half because we lost 80, so 40 would be half, but we're losing 50 in only the last third of the range. So we're losing most of the range, most of the penetration in the last third of the range anyway. So if you are firing within 1,000 meters of the 1,500, right, of the 1,750, I should say, you are getting almost all of the penetration value. Let's see, at 1,000 meters, we still have 230 millimeters of penetration. We are consistently penning any tank in the game with that, because even a King Tiger at 230, we have a 94% chance of penning a King Tiger at 1,000 meters with a Panther G on APCR, which is not what I thought the case was. I thought the APCR dropped off much faster just at the beginning, but in fact, it's at the very tail end of all the APCR. If we look at, say, let's hop back down here to the Pack 40 again. Where'd you go, Pack 40? Pack 40! Pack 40! Oh, I didn't go far enough. Okay, right here. Yeah. So we look at the APCR on the Pack 40. It's still, even at 1,000 meters, at 155 millimeters of penetration, which is still higher than the base pen value of the AP shell. So we're still way past it in that point. Actually, the APCR only ever dips below the AP shell at 1,200 meter range, which is nuts, which is crazy. Now, the Panther G APCR is kind of an outlier because it has 1,750 meter range, which is very abnormal, right? The only other APCR that gets out that far is the Hellcat and stuff. And as I said before, I think this weapon is just absolute bullcrap. This APCR doesn't even follow the rules of every other APCR shell. If we look here, this only has a 50 millimeter drop off in penetration down to the 2000, which is kind of like, why? Every other APCR drops more than that, like significantly more than that. Like the Pack drops 70 millimeters of penetration. The Gerlich drops 95 millimeters of penetration. I don't fully understand, honestly, why the American APCR gets like the super mega buff of the universe. Now, clearly it was stronger than other APCR that it's longer, but the fact that it's even lower drop off on top of it, I'm gonna assume there's a historical reason for this, and I'm just not akin to it. Please feel free to tell me in the comments. But like, American APCR is just absolutely broken. Like, it is nothing compared to any other weapon in the game. And remember, this is very important to remember too. All APCR penetrations equal a crit. Okay, this is another incorrect set of information I functioned under for years. Every APCR pen is a crit. It's not that it has a higher chance of a crit. It absolutely crits every single time. There's no like, oh, you get luckier. No. Regular AP has a crit chance. APCR is a crit definite. It just matters what kind of crit you get. So this is really important to understand. Now, what is the general drop-off of guns? There is none. I wish I could tell you like, oh, most guns by the end of their range drop 50 millimeters of penetration. That isn't actually how it works at all. It seems relatively random. I don't actually understand how the numbers were ever created or where they came from. There's some mathematical, he did send it to me, the author sent it to me. It's very confusing here, but if we look, this is how it works apparently. So you have this little mathematical equation. AP uses a calculation which is AP in game divided by 5 minus 1. For example, 145 AP in the game is 28 and 95 is 18. I don't know. This is because the AP isn't just the integer value, but the enumeration. Again, these are people trying to figure out how this works. So using the table's intermediate values calculated with linear, God, this is already above me. For example, at 87.5% distance, the rapid tail would be 58% of its penetration value, and the result is rounded up. For example, okay, Nadsorn at 1,000 meters, 50% max range, Lentigraph, so it's like different like level caliber of weapons, which I don't even think they use anymore, will have 90% of its AP base. So base AP is 230, so it will be 45 for the calculation because that's divided by 5. So 90% of 45 is 40.5, rounded up to 41. 41 plus 1 times 5 is 210 millimeters of penetration, and that's how they get it. It's not complicated mathematically, but brain-wise, it's complicated. Like, why the hell does it have to be this? But it is. So anyway, you get this drop off that is really inconsistent. Like, we can see the Elephant, Jagdpanther, the 88 that's on a King Tiger and all that kind of stuff goes from 230 all the way down to 165, right? So that is a 65 millimeter drop, right? A 65 millimeter drop of penetration. But if we go down to, say, another really common unit, a Panzer IV, right? We go from 135 down to 95. That's only a 40 millimeter drop. Right now, there's 250 meters less dropping because of the range. That's a lot more to lose. So we can see that a lot of these units do a lot of penetration basically at the tail end of all the guns. Truthfully, the first 500 meters, at least 400. It appears at least the first 400 meters for everything that's AP tends to be no drop off at all. Like, me looking down here, the only thing that are dropping off is APCR. Yeah, APCR drops off within the first 200 to 300 already. So the drop off again is faster, but the rate is not fast enough to catch up with AP drop off, right? So APCR still has higher penetration, but the drop off is faster. That's not that that's inaccurate. It just is not as extreme as I thought it was personally. But AP tends to be out to at least 400 and sometimes much more, right? The Panzer IV gets all the way out to 500 before it has any drop off. And even then the drop off is minute, right? You've only lost 10 millimeters up to 1,000 meter range, right? So it's something to be aware of, that most of the drop off value comes in the last 400 to 500 meters of range. in that range, then all of a sudden we're losing 20, 30, 40 millimeters of penetration in that last chunk of the range, especially APCR. APCR, the vast majority is the end. But the AP, most of it still tends to be tail-ended to the very end of this graph. So it's very important to understand that up to at least 50% of the gun's range, you're only losing 10 to 20 millimeters of penetration. So you're still getting the vast majority of the gun's penetration value. And within 500 meters, you're basically getting all of it. It is a full value, even at point blank. And I know we're always like, point blank is what you get. Truthfully, it's more like that value is good up to 200 or 300, truth be told. APCR is the one where it drops a little bit faster, right? We can see right here in the Gerlich coming down pretty quick. The PAC 40 at 300 is already losing 5 millimeters. But you're still getting most of it, right? But within that first 500, you're getting the vast majority, if not all of, depending on what you're looking at, that penetration value. So that is how AP drop-off works. That is the secret to it, is that I in my mind, I kind of have already now rechunked my mind into 500,000, 1,500, 2,000, right? I lose basically none in the first 500. I've lost maybe 20 in the first 1,000. I've lost getting to 40 in 1,500, and then at the end, probably up to 60 somewhere in that zone that I'm coming down pretty hard, especially in the high stuff, right? If we're getting 2,000 meters, we're starting pretty high, generally speaking. And also to dispel the rumor, a lot of times I hear an argument that Tigers are better than Panthers at long range, or at least they feel better. But if we go out to the long range of the Panther and Tiger, the Panther still has 15 millimeters more penetration than the Tiger. There is no, the Tiger does not actually have less drop off. Well, actually it does. It only drops 40 millimeters while the Panther drops 50. So yes, the Tiger does have a lower drop off of damage of AP excuse me, I keep saying it wrong, penetration value, but because it starts 20 millimeters less, that 10 millimeters it gains doesn't make a big enough difference, right? We still pen better at every range with a Panther. That's all there is to it. A Panther pens better at every single range. There's no argument for it. There just isn't. There's no way to swing that a Panther is worse. Another thing to note too is the flak. You know, this thing that's supposed to feel really good at killing tanks and stuff. If you actually put it at max range, it's struggling to pen T-30-45s pretty often. So it's something to be aware of. Now, hopping over to crits, let's talk about these now. I'm actually going to back up a little here because the table's easier to see. So I always personally thought the only thing that front, side, and rear armor did was reduce armor, right? So side armor was less, rear armor was the most less, way less, I mean. So like, it was like, okay, that's what side armor matter. Like, that's what the armor things matter. But apparently, unbeknownst to me, if you pen tanks at different angles, you get better crits. If you crit a tank from the side, you actually have better critical values than if you pen it in the front. And if you pen it on the back, then you get way better crit values. So if we look here, the red ones are the ones that kill. So red on here are ones that are basically knock the tank out instantly. And we can see front, side, back armor. If you pen the tank from the front, you have 5 possibilities here of getting killed, right? 5 here. Side, it's the same. So not a big change here. But when you get to the back, you end up with 10 crits that can kill you. Now, you might be thinking, wait, what? It's bailed out twice, fuel explosion twice. Every single one of these is an equal chance of happening on every crit. Okay, so that's basic. Apparently, that is how this works. So every one of these is equal chance of happening on all of these crits. At least that's the way it's been explained to me. I could be wrong. Please let me know in the comments if I'm still wrong on this. But the reason there are doubles of all of these over here is because these are all really bad ones, and they come up more often so that they have more of a chance of happening in this roll that happens every time a tank is hit. So even we can see on the side here, we have these little, so a lot of the crits that happen and we don't see are these extra damage crits. The rumor that APCR has a higher % chance of critting, and not that it always crits, is because some of these we don't see. So a lot of times these will happen and you don't actually see the crit. It's apparently a visual bug. So a lot of times when you get these incendiaries or spallings and things, you have done a crit. The weapon did more damage, but remember, APCR has lower damage. So if your gun is only doing 4 damage to start and you add 2 damage to it, it's not like it suddenly kills the tank. Now, you will see sometimes that APCR will kill in 2 shots. That's because it landed one of these crits that did 2 extra damage, and if the APCR does 4 base damage, now you got 4 plus 6 is 10. Now the APCR killed in 2 shots. Now you'll notice though that the chance of doing extra damage is not super duper high because we have 19 options here, right? So really, let's round up to 20 just for the sake of my math, right? 4 out of 20, we're looking at a 20% chance that you'll get one of these extra damage crits, right? And then you'll have you have basically 25% of getting an insta kill. That's basically how it works. Now remember, for AP, there is only a small percent that you get a crit to start, right? So on AP shells, you first have to roll for critical chance happening, which is not super high, and then it rolls one of these randomly. Now on APCR, this happens every single time it pens. One of these things happens every single time. All right, and we can see some of these really suck, some of them don't suck so much, right? Loader wounded, loader killed, sight damage, shooter kill. All of these are annoying, but don't take your tank out of action completely. Driver killed, transmission damage, very common. So yeah, I again had no idea that different hits on sides matter. So like on the side here, there are extra track brokens down here. Or wait, what are the extras here? Turret stuck? No, turret stuck's there. Shooter, sight damage, loader wounded, driver killed, transmission damage destroyed, and engine damage and engine destroyed only exists on the side and full back. Interesting. No wonder we don't see these crits like ever. They're very uncommon. And also you can see the chance of just doing extra damage goes down as well. All the rear ones are bad. Very bad, right? All of these insta kill, these all basically, like, the engine destroys, doesn't kill the tank, but leaves it completely immobilized. Gun jam makes it completely useless. Turret stuck essentially makes it completely useless. And the crew panic causes you not to be able to control it for a time, right? So, wow. No idea. Also, ricochets, of course, have chances of causing crits too, and also affected by the front back side thing, right? So we can see why there's so many bounces because, again, the RNG is simply rolling between all of these and randomly gives you one of them. So there's a chance, even on a front bounce, that you're going to get a shooter KO, driver loader KO, or transmission damage. Side shots, if you get very unlucky and bounce on a side shot, which is infuriating, but it happens, you have more chances of getting a random crit here, such as crew panic now being added in, crew KO, which stuns the whole thing for 10 seconds, and damage engine. And on the back, wow, that would be depressing. If you got a 10 on the back and didn't get any pen, you still get a pretty good chance here, a much higher chance of getting some sort of crit. So yeah, that's how critting works, for those who wondered. It's just all of these poured together, random dice roll, and you get one of these crits here, which means it is possible to get these insta deaths even on crits on AP and stuff. So for clearness, APCR pens every time and rolls for one of these every single time. So essentially you do have a 20%, 25% chance, 25, somewhere in there, of getting an insta kill on every APCR shot. Penetration, every APCR penetration from the front. Now, on the back, you have basically a 50% chance of insta killing the tank. That's how it works. If you rear shot something, you have a 50% chance with APCR of instantly killing it. So, wow. These are all these things like I just did not understand for a long time. So I hope you guys stuck with this because this could immediately propel your knowledge of this game up past a guy who played for 2 years already. Like for several years. Yeah. All this stuff is available on Discord somewhere on the Eugen forum pages. You can find this on the Steam page and stuff. He just linked it to me, this Google Doc and all these kind of things. This is all available there. They have a nice little easier breakdown for weapons specifically, but it just was a lot more scrolling, which is why I was using this kind of squished up one. But this is a great way to start to understand how the weapons and stuff actually interact in game and what you can expect when choosing APCR or AP and which one you should be choosing in different situations. If you guys enjoyed this, hit that like button, subscribe, consider checking out the Patreon link down below, and consider checking out attackpowergaming.com. Thank you everyone for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a fantastic day.